What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Off Track podcast, where we debate and discuss everything golf from an amateur's point of view. I'm Charles, along with my co-host Roy. We're two tech guys addicted to golf, and we're currently working on our own golf startup. As always, today's episode is brought to you by TRAQ Golf, the training system designed to help you practice like the pros. The TRAQ spray shows you exact strike patterns on turf or grass. It also allows you to do drills just like the pros that you wouldn't dream of doing with alignment sticks. And the blueprint helps you build structure into every session. Together, they take the guesswork out of practice so you can actually improve faster. Find out more at traqgolf.com. That's TRAQ golf.com. Before we dive in, make sure you follow us wherever you podcast and follow at TRAQ Golf on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok for highlights, drills, and all of our other golf content. Today, we're diving into the Internet Invitational, the YouTube golf tournament that has the entire golf world buzzing. Between the drama, the controversies, and some genuinely impressive and not so impressive play, this thing gave us more talking points than I think the last Ryder Cup. So today, we're going to break it all down, what worked, what didn't, and what events like this might mean for the future of golf. So with that, let's get off track. The Internet Invitational was 48 golf creators that came together for $1 million prize. Barstool and Bob the Sports collaborated to create this tournament. The format was interesting. There definitely was drama and a little bit of controversy, but what did you think of it overall?
It had its appeal in a lot of ways. It had its boring spots in a lot of ways as well. So I watched most of it in either 2x speed or 1.75x speed.
Oh,
And that's really fast, right? That's like warping people's voices, and you probably are missing some stuff. But there are some parts where genuinely I was just bored. I didn't think it was interesting at all. And I also, just because I knew we were going to talk about this a little bit, I didn't want to just categorically skip pieces either. So it kind of forced myself, or I kind of forced myself to have to watch a lot of it until the last two episodes. I thought the last two episodes were a little bit more interesting than the first four. And maybe it's because I was more familiar with the people by then.
yeah.
And that was the other thing for me. The first two episodes, I was like, I have no idea who these people are. And they would just, drop names and people would be talking. And I'm like, why are you interested? Like, who are you? I don't know who's on what team. There's no indication. So it was a lot to follow as well, if you're not familiar with everybody. But it has its points, which I think we'll get into. But overall, it was let's call it a little bit more than halfway from a thumbs perspective. How about you?
For me, I actually watched it just in regular speed, but I skipped around a lot. You're scrolling on YouTube and you can kind of see what's going on. And so I skipped a lot of that, like the one-on-one banters that they had like in the carts. I skipped a lot. Same with you. The last two episodes, I did watch most of it, but I would agree. I think when I first looked at the draft list, I knew maybe a third of the golfers. Obviously, I knew everyone that was on tier A. And I think tier A were basically people that were plus handicaps. And then tier B were people that were like scratched to like 4 or 5 handicap. And out of there, I knew like half. And then everyone else, like, I didn't really know, like tier C, D, E, F, like, I don't know how many they had, other than John Gruden. And John Gruden, I didn't know he was a part of Barstool until this tournament. And he had that.
I had no idea who's a part of Barstool and not. Even at the end, I was like, I have no idea who's actually a part of Barstool.
Yeah. I feel like obviously Frankie was a part of Barstool, Dave, but aside from them, like I later learned Beef was a part of Barstool because, he passed away. I think it was like last week. But other than that, I have no idea who these guys are. But I still found it, the characters were interesting. So for the first, I think 2 to 3 episodes, I definitely watched the entirety of characters that I knew and liked, or that were kind of unknown but interesting. There was like Chaz, who I didn't know before the tournament. And he was, I think, riveting whenever he was on screen. And so I watched him. I watched a lot of just like the Peter Finches and the Rick Shields, just because they're like the godfathers of golf. So I watched that stuff. It was actually funny to watch the English guys like cuss on screen. But yeah, overall, I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than you. And also I was stuck in the hospital, so I had nothing to do. So maybe that's another reason why I got to watch everything. But I feel like I would give it like a 7 and a 7.5 out of 10. Like it was like a C plus B minus grade.
That's a pretty good score.
Yeah.
So here's the hot take that I didn't tell you. I watched now with all of the film, even at 2x speed.
Mhm.
I spent more time watching the Internet Invitational than I did this last Ryder Cup.
Yeah. I was going to say for us with kids now, we don't have 6, 7 hours to sit in front of a TV and watch the entire tournament. So other than the majors, I don't watch golf tournaments. I watch highlights on YouTube. And I
Right.
felt like this kind of was an extended highlight rather than it was you sitting down and watching a tournament. So I don't know if that's what worked for me, but the format was a bit more what I'm used to consuming in golf as of late.
Because it's a little bit more YouTube-esque.
Yeah, because after your shots, you don't have to wait for them to walk up to their ball, right? It cuts, there's a little bit of like cart interview, and then it's their next hole.
Right.
And so I
Right.
felt like the pace was a little bit faster to watch golf rather
Yeah.
than an actual tour event.
Right. And having it be filled with Frank Nobles or Brandel filling the dead space with boring commentary that frankly nobody wants to hear.
Yeah.
Just to kill the time, right? While they're waiting for whatever they're deciding to do on their next shot.
Yeah. Was there anything like from like a format structure or anything you didn't like about the Invitational?
That's a really good question. So from a pure golfing format perspective,
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was actually pretty good, right? I mean, they were playing the standard games that we're used to, which is scramble and alternate shot. So nothing really from that standpoint. I thought the drafting was actually interesting, that it was live drafting on the spot. But for me, I think what I was missing, and I kind of mentioned this, was because I didn't know a lot of the people for the first few episodes, it was very confusing on who was what team,
Yeah.
right? And the overlays that they had, the Duncan overlays, they were relatively small. So if you didn't know their name, if you didn't know who they were, like there was no clear indication of who they were or what team they were doing. They didn't label them or throw their name up on screen. So I think it was more like the production formatting that I think could have used a little bit of tweaking for me. Just again, and maybe I'm not the YouTube golf generation. Actually, I know I'm not. I actively try not to watch a lot of YouTube golf, but I would say that I didn't love, and then a lot of the I don't even know how to describe this, right? It was kind of like that reality show-esque, let's just capture everything and cut it together later. And there's a lot of muttering and side conversations and chaos with the camera. It was good. It added a lot of energy. But I almost wanted like a host other than Portnoy, because Portnoy was not playing the part of a show host. He was playing the part of, this is my tournament, F you. It's more like somebody that's guiding what's happening, the master of ceremony, whatever you want to call it. I think that's what I was missing, right? Somebody that's kind of like thinking about the viewer and guiding everything from an action standpoint for the sake of the viewer.
Yeah, I agree with that. Especially the first 2 episodes, because there were 48 golfers and I knew maybe like 15 to 20 of them. I didn't get a lot of like information that I wanted that I think I was used to from a sports broadcast. And this was obviously part sports broadcast, part entertainment. But yeah, I absolutely wanted that. I think the hard part was, and number one, like I'm not a huge Dave Portnoy fan, but the fact that he was in charge of the rules, but he didn't know anything about golf really annoyed me. Because he was now, I was like, okay, like he's doing this all purely for chaos and for entertainment purposes, not for golf. So that a little bit destroyed the competition side of it. Yeah, I was not impressed with Dave. But I actually felt like Robbie Berger, so Bob, right? I felt like he should have had more of that, like you said, the host, that commentator type of role. Because when the Bob the Sports Guy, both him and FP were on, the stuff that they had to say, I felt were very valuable for people to just hear as things were going on. I guess the thing that didn't work was that they were also competitors the first 2 days. So there really wasn't anyone that was there. Yeah, maybe they don't compete in the future and there is like a formal host. But I guess from a production challenge standpoint, that could also be a challenge because there's so many people going out at the same time playing all these different holes. You don't have like a broadcast booth where you're just watching everyone, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, from a host perspective, it's funny because I was thinking you don't necessarily need a booth. A booth is, it's a little antiquated, and you kind of. I did really like the fact that there was a lot of interaction with the people in the last two rounds when all of the eliminated players were allowed to just be in their own carts and kind of drive
yeah.
around and interact. Like that was actually really entertaining for me. So I think having a host build them a mobile booth in one of those larger golf carts, right? Or drive them around, have them participate from a banter standpoint and a dialogue standpoint. Not the walking interviews of the PGA Tour, because those are just frankly really boring, and they should just stop doing that altogether. But I do think that there's something that I was just personally missing in terms of how to guide the storytelling and being able to follow that with someone versus it just being like, here's all this chaos, let's make a story out of it. And in some ways, it felt like they were trying a little too hard to pull stories out. The first two episodes were just dominated by Luke Kwan being the villain, right? Like, okay, yes, it wasn't good, but like he overnight became the most hated person on the golf internet, and they just like would not drop it. That was like the only thing that they would talk about versus, there was some decent and not so decent golf being played that maybe it kind of took away from a little bit.
But yeah, I definitely think that there is that reality TV part of this entertainment product, and they did need to do that in order to draw the audiences that aren't hardcore golfers. And so I definitely could see why they did it. And from an editing standpoint, you're talking about what, like at least 48 different video footages. I felt like the editors, like this was a very, very tough project. So I do think like the editors themselves did a pretty good job. But I will agree with you on that. We didn't know the golfers that well. I don't think the organizers knew the golfers that well, because when I go back and look at the way that they tiered the golfers, now knowing how they play, they were completely off. Okay, maybe not completely off, but they were like 50% off. The lesser known names, they put them in wrong tiers. And that absolutely messed up the draft. And also the captains that were drafting, they didn't know everyone. And so they were constantly like asking other guys like, hey, like, is he good? Is he bad? Like, what's his strengths? And so I feel like they need to do a better job of really knowing the players that are on the field. And maybe that'll also play a role in helping us understand who all the players on the field are.
Yeah. A little bit more in depth of their profile, who they are, I think would have been a lot more helpful. And it was just kind of telling, although I don't know how much of this was a bit because you can never tell with him. But like even Portnoy didn't know their names.
Yeah.
Right? Like he kept calling people the wrong name, or like he called Bubby Bubble at one point because he was just reading it off of his phone.
I think he's such a jerk that he was just doing that on purpose.
Right. And I wouldn't put it past him if that's what he was doing. Yeah. But there were times where I was like, oh, he genuinely doesn't know who these people are. And weird too, where 48 is a relatively small field. If you think about it in the context of like a PGA Tour event. It's not hard to know 48 people if you just go through like a call sheet of who's showing up. And so, I think they could have put a little bit more into that.
Well, let's jump into what really has the internet buzzing, which is the cheating controversy. So in the last two episodes, you saw that there was, I think they're calling it Slopegate, where Mo was caught, or he wasn't caught, but he was accused of using slope on his rangefinder. What was really interesting for me is that Mo is now part of Good. And it was the former Good and the current Good guys that actually called him out. So Micah was the first one to call him out at the par 3 challenge because he read a yardage and it was like 5-6 yards off compared to everyone else. So Micah was like, Mo, are you using slope? And he was quickly like, nope. And then later on, the guy that was really pushing for it in the finale was Bubby, who is also a good guy. So I was like, do these guys know something that we don't? Like they're calling out their own guy for potentially cheating in $1 million competition. So I thought that was really, really interesting. But overall, what did you think of the Slopegate cheating controversy?
So the first time when Micah called him out,
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, that's weird. Like you can get a misreading. I feel like 5 yards is the difference between models sometimes. Like which rangefinder do you have? And they were all using their personal ones, right? Because I think I saw Paige had a Blue Tees one.
Yeah.
Mo was using the Bushnell. Yeah, that's like model difference, tolerance difference, and where you were standing on the tee box. And I think that for that one, it was like 138, 143, or 137, 142, right in that range.
Yeah.
God, that's not a big enough difference for me to be like, you're definitely cheating. You definitely have your slope on. But when it was later, when Bubby was kind of going at it with him and they called in Portnoy and they were trying to they were making a big deal out of it. And Mo and the team were like getting the inside information of, oh, they're saying that your slope is on. I was like, oh, okay. Like this is now a consistent enough thing, but they didn't show enough times where Mo was getting a much different number for me to conclusively be like, oh, there's something weird. Like there must have been something that they didn't air or they didn't capture on film that was leading them to say this. Cause I didn't think it was a big deal. Like his numbers were not so uniquely different versus what they were showing everybody else was getting, that I was like, oh man, he definitely has an advantage. Also because nobody was hitting shots that consistent and that good that I felt like it was a material advantage anyway. And then they showed him taking it off the cart and I was like, oh, he's definitely cheating. He was definitely cheating. So in my book, it's like, yeah, he definitely had it on. There's just no conclusive evidence, but for sure he cheated.
So I have the Bushnell and it shows a little red, but it's very easy to like switch it off. Right?
Yeah.
Like I could literally be shooting a number and like flip it off. And so I think it's actually very easy to cheat if you really wanted to cheat. Now, Mo was also, I think in the part 3, the ones where he was shooting it was hitting lights out. And I think that was the first one where even like Dalkey was short on a few or long on a few, whereas Mo was hitting his number. And he is, I think, a self-professed like scratch golfer. And so I think that's where a lot of people started to wonder because he was hitting everything pin high, whereas these other guys who are supposed to be better than him were consistently short or long. And so I think because of that, there was that accusation. And then once he started reading out his yardages and it was different, then people were really like, whoa, like, is there something going on? So I think that was, the genesis of, is this guy cheating? Because he was hitting also just really, really well. But do you think, like a scratch golfer, the slope actually matters?
For a scratch golfer, oh, that's such a good question because I feel like the answer is both yes and no at the same time. Yes, it matters because I think they're good enough to be that dialed in that a difference of 5 yards one way or another is going to be very material to them. Yeah. Especially if they're trying to pick, and because they had the carts with the greens, right? Because I think at one point I heard Francis or somebody say, like, oh, look, it's all funneling that way. So they had the green reading on the cart screen. So yeah, if they're picking a landing area and seeing the flag, then I think for a scratch golfer or better, absolutely. At the same time, for me, it's a no because if you got to scratch, you're good enough that you understand the relativity decently enough that you don't need the reading necessarily, right? And so I'm thinking like, what's that course that you and I played last time? The one with like the giant drops off of the mountain.
Oh yeah.
For us, that giant drop, like the slope reading is going to give us a difference of like 2 or 3 clubs. I think at that point for us, it gets materially important in terms of club selection. But a scratch golfer, I would assume at that point you can look at it and be like, oh, that's probably 2 or 3 clubs. That's about a 30, 40 foot, drop, whatever it may be. Because even with us, I feel like we're decent at it, right? We might be off by a club one in either direction, but the scratch golfer, I don't think it should matter as much to their game. But I don't know. How do you think?
For me, it's a confidence thing. If you know exactly what the yardage is and there's no guesswork, then there is confidence in being able to step up knowing exactly what club, how hard you have to hit it, and it'll go that distance, especially when you're scratch. Like, you know your distances pretty well.
Yeah.
So I think it's that versus going in there and still not 100% sure if it's 143 or, 137. Like, am I hitting my pitching wedge fully, or am I easing my 9-iron, right? That uncertainty, I feel like, does play a role in the slope. And I guess kind of like a follow-up to that, I was going to ask you, why do you think the PGA Tour doesn't allow slope? Because they basically have it. Because, the caddies are there days before with their yard books, and they are measuring with slope distances from various parts of the course. So why not just have slope?
So I remember golf before slope was even, I guess, invented, created, or before the first rangefinder even had slope on it. And even now, the rangefinder that I use doesn't have slope on it. And I've had it for a really long time. Up until the advent, I would have said that reading elevation change was a skill, and that it was part of a full comprehensive golf game, right? To know, like, I'm hitting this uphill, I have to hit whatever number of clubs longer. Yeah. And then what the reaction of it is going to be once it hits that plateau, or the same the other way. That's all part of the game. But as soon as they started letting the caddies use it to measure, then to me, it's like, okay, it all goes out the window anyway. Because at that point, what's the difference between your caddy getting really good measurement, the few days before, versus you just shooting it on the spot and frankly, just speeding up the game? I would rather at this point just either say there's no slope anywhere, like you're not allowed a slope device anywhere on a tournament, or just use it everywhere and just, make it easier.
Yeah, because for me, like, when I see the yardage books, like, they have arrows pointing towards elevation changes even on the fairway and on the greens. And so reading the field is kind of been out the window, unless you're going to, like, disable, like, the yardage books altogether. Like, I feel like that skill hasn't really been utilized anyways. And so why not just have the slope? Do you think it'll speed up the pace of play on a PGA Tour if you're just able to have a rangefinder with slope on it? Because I think the argument before was that, well, if you have the yardage book and you have slope, it might actually slow down the pace, because now these guys are going to, like, want to measure everything on the field because it does matter to them, and that's going to slow down pace. But I'm just like, I don't buy that argument. Like, I don't know why it would be slower.
No, I would say if you have a rangefinder with slope and you have the green and the pin location, that's all you need. And from there, it's like, what is the wind doing? What is my lie? Because at that point, like, a professional, you should be able to make a very quick calculation of where they want to hit it. Right? Like, that pin is playing 137. I have all this room in the back. I know it slopes this way. Cool. I'm going to hit it here. Yeah. Right? Like, that to me feels like a what it should be, versus what are they're going to recalculate everything? No, I think that's silly.
Going back real quick to whether, Mo was cheating or not, you think he absolutely cheated, right?
Yes.
I also think he absolutely cheated. And everyone is so focused on looking at the cart footage on, like, when he grabbed the rangefinder, like, is he actually, like, turning it on or off? I think it's beyond that. The fact that he went to his cart first, because Ryan Whitney, he's a former hockey player that I think is also part of Barstool. He went and told Mo, also because he bet on that team. Dave bet on the other team, whereas Ryan bet on Paige and Melosi's team, which is a conflict of interest when there's a rule guy betting, right?
Yep.
But he went and told him, and he made a beeline to his cart, and he grabbed it and he looked. If you know you're not cheating, there's no point to even look at your rangefinder, because you're like, it's absurd. I didn't turn it on. But I think the fact that he went and even checked is because he wasn't sure if he turned it off after he used it last time. Yeah, I absolutely feel like he cheated. And, I've played in tournaments where they will literally put tape over my rangefinder because they don't want me cheating. And so this is just another aspect of the tournament where I feel like there were a lot of guys that were creating an entertainment product and not necessarily a competitive golf product. And so they didn't think of all these things that even a community golf tournament does, which is
Right.
they set it on the no slope, they put tape over it, and they're like, if we ever notice any part of the tape is off, you're DQ'd.
Right.
Or if something happens where you drop it and the tape comes off, you better stop, immediately call a marshal, and they're going to put new tape on it. Right.
Right.
And so even community golf tournaments have that level of organization, and these guys didn't. I mean, the fact that Dave didn't even know what a slope was or how to use it.
That
Come on.
I was going to say that earlier, right? Like that clip just sticks out in my mind so much where he's walking along the carts and he goes, I don't even know what a slope is.
Yeah.
Right. Or whatever. Sorry, I do a terrible Dave Portnoy accent. But when he said that, I was like, God, how is this the guy that's running the tournament?
Yeah. And he's the rules guy.
Right. You're the rules guy. And he even said, to his credit, I guess, he said later, like we should have had a real rules person here. Like, yeah, you should have had a real rules person here. Right. And then pair him up with somebody entertaining if your rules person is boring.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you could have found somebody. And I guess Copilot was a sponsor because, they would do some clip. Microsoft, you train Copilot with the rule book and then just have somebody use the rule. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many better ways to have executed it to make it so that nobody felt like they were being ripped off on $1 million tournament.
Yeah. And also, I thought it was a missed opportunity. Like, you could have had Blue Tees or Bushnell sponsor no slope rangefinders on every cart. They would have absolutely done that. So,
yes,
a missed opportunity on that as well. Well, the other cheating controversy was Paige flattening all this tall grass for Molosi to hit. That was also really, really curious. Also because Paige was talking smack just a few holes before, but you caught that, right?
Yep. For the record, I have also never played competitive golf, Paige, but even I knew that you cannot do anything to materially change your lie.
Yeah.
Right? You can't move a branch. You can't have somebody hold it for you. You can't move the grass. Also, like that's one of the first things you learn from a competitive golf perspective, never improve your lies. So something about that just smelled really off.
And she was a D1 collegiate golfer. So were you allowed to do this in college?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's just like fundamental changing your lie. I think she was trying to play up the sympathy card. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
I didn't know. There was a lot of tears. I mean, you got caught red-handed. It's either you own up to it and then, potentially forfeit a lot of holes, or you say, I don't know, plead ignorance, and then play up the sympathy card.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, she has been getting a lot of hate throughout the entire series. And, Paige was actually someone, from a play perspective, I was pleasantly surprised. I felt like she played really good golf throughout the entire tournament. But the antics, and I recently listened to a Peter Finch podcast where he talked about this. And number one, it was, I think, few holes before, Brad Dahlke went to Peter and was like, can you keep an eye on that team? Because I don't know how they're hitting all these shots from the middle of nowhere onto the green, right? And so they were already suspicious of him, which again, going back to the fact that Dahlke is a good guy, and he is calling out his own, castmate that something fishy is going on. I feel like Mo just generally is one of those golfers that likes to bend the rules here and there. But after that, Peter Finch was like, absolutely, there's no way they could have gotten that ball out as far as they did, because there was tall grass in front of the ball, behind the ball, around the ball, and Paige literally went there and flattened everything out so that there was room for Mo to hit that shot. Obviously, they ended up losing the hole, which is why they were like, oh, it's a non-factor because they lost anyways.
Realistically, they should probably gone back, looked at every hole where they hit at a fescue, and just marked it as a loss. And I think at that point they were all square. Or that match was interesting. All the controversy aside, because there was never more than I think one hole lead either way, right? I think for the entirety of the match. So that would have had a material impact on the outcome, but probably, I mean, not really, right, in the final outcome, but it would have had a material impact on, I guess, the storytelling of and how the round played out. But yeah, they should have lost every hole where there was even a suspicion that they were in the fescue or in the long stuff and potentially cheating or moving.
FP was like praying that they'd lose that hole because then it wouldn't be an issue. And they ended
Yeah.
up losing the hole. But they had so much camera footage that if they really wanted to, I mean, they had a camera person following them around. I feel like they could have, but that could have ended the content at like 20 minutes. And so they
Yeah.
were like, for content's sake, we got to just keep going. We're not going to go back
Yeah.
and check. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think in a formal tournament, they would have.
But they did. I mean, for going back to Slopegate, they pulled the GoPro camera off of Mo's cart.
Yeah.
They viewed it a few times, and everybody that watched it was like, "Oh, right," and had that reaction of like, "Oh God, no." And then they even loaded the clip onto a computer so that they could see, it. Right? So they definitely could have. So I do agree with you. I think that was a little bit of, hey, let's let the story play out. It's a good round. It's competitive. It's tight. Let's not bring this in and turn this into a bigger thing.
Before that, the second to last episode for the final part 3 and the pairing for even the finale, there was kind of like a captain debate. For you, it didn't matter that captain's debate as much, right?
It didn't.
When Paige was like basically finagling the draft so that she would get a stronger team, like that didn't matter for you,
right? Paige and some of the other captains agreed as well that there was a quote unquote fairness issue with how the draft was handled and the distribution, and then they started just manually moving people around so that it wasn't a draft. I don't have a big issue with it because everybody went along with it. At least from the speed at which I was watching, it seemed like everybody was going along with it. There was nobody that was vehemently opposed or was like, no, this is my team. I'm good with it. I think they all kind of had a level of, there needs to be some level of competitive breakdown of these teams for there to be good content. Because at the end of the day, everybody there in some way, shape, or form is related to content creation and they know the value of a good story.
Yeah.
So that's why I wasn't like, oh, she's bullying her way around it. Yeah, she was the ringleader, but I didn't feel like she was making anybody do what they didn't want to do. I know you felt differently. What bothered you?
I felt differently. I don't think Peter was happy with his team because, and him, I don't know if it's like an English thing, his mannerism. I think he basically just sucked it up and was just like, all right. And of course, Brad didn't have any issues because they didn't change his team. Neither did Micah. At the end, the only one that was negatively affected was Peter Finch. And Peter Finch was just like, whatever, like, let the baby have the bottle kind of thing. Number one, I don't think Paige should have been a captain to begin with. And there's a little clip where Dave said that so initially, there was going to be a committee, probably Dave and someone else like Bob and a couple other guys that were going to pick the captains.
Yeah.
They didn't want to do that. So they wanted to pick their own captains, and Paige the entire time has just been kind of injecting herself into this like captain role. Yeah. Even when they were doing the draft picks, she is so vocal and overruling the captain on who he should pick next. So I absolutely feel like Paige made herself the captain when she shouldn't have been the captain. Mo should have been the captain. And then based on that, they should have just done a straight off draft. And I do agree with the way that they did it, which is, okay, there's the 4 captains. Let's rank them 1 through 4. And the worst is going to pick first. Yeah. And it's not a snake. So second round, the worst will pick again first, right? So actually like Brad would pick the last player on each round. And so that was kind of fair. So yeah, Paige shouldn't have been the captain. And then they did a draft and she picked DOD King as her number 1 pick. And he is not the best player. So number 1, she screwed up her own draft. And so for me, I felt like she did the draft. She went back and she's like, oh crap, I messed up. So now I'm going to use my own tactics to finagle my way to make sure I have a stronger team. And so that's what annoyed me so much. Like, if you drafted wrong, that's on you. But now you're going to go and mess up someone else's draft because you made a mistake. And so I had an issue with that. But, again, I was impressed with her play, just not impressed with her tactics behind the scenes.
Yeah. I agree with that. Although it was, I guess for them, it created controversy and entertainment in its own right. But I
Yeah. Now, one thing that's interesting, I have the draft tiers. You don't. But the winning team was 1 guy from tier A, which is Brad, and 2 guys from tier C. So Francis and Beef were both tier C guys. The other team, Paige's team, was two people from tier B, Paige and Mo, and one guy from tier C, which is Frankie. And I would argue that Frankie is probably the best golfer in tier C.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ended up being like a superstar and two average guys versus two good guys and probably the best of the average guys teamed up together. And I guess that kind of made sense that it went all the way to the 18th hole, but the team ended up winning with the superstar player. If you had your choice to pick a team, would you pick a guy who was one tier A and two tier Cs, or two tier B and the best of tier C? Because in alternate shots, the weakest link can also ruin your team dynamic. So
Yeah.
what would you pick?
Oh, that's so hard, because you could argue that Frankie lost the match,
Mm-hmm.
but you can also argue that Brad won so many holes and so many situations for them.
Yeah.
On the other side.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like it's 50-50 for me, because it really will depend on the day. Because tier C, and even maybe to a certain degree tier B, but the tier C golfers I could see as being really streaky one way or another.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be your biggest determination. So I take it back. I'm going to take the superstar.
Yeah.
Because I think having a C or two C players on either side is so wildly variable that at the end, I want the one guy that may be able to pull off the hero shots.
Yeah. Before,
What are you going to go with?
I think before the tournament, I would have argued that having two solid guys, two Bs, limits the risk. Because if you have two C guys, I feel like the risk is raised exponentially. And even if there is a hero that can pull them out of it, I feel like it wouldn't make a difference. But now that I've watched the tournament, I think the thing that Brad did for the two Cs was put a lot of confidence in them. Because Francis and even Beef played very solid golf. And I think knowing that there is this superhero that can save you if anything goes wrong alleviates so much tension and stress. Whereas the two B players, like Paige and Mo, I felt carried so much on their shoulder. And same thing with Frankie. Like he was like, I can't mess up because there's a superhero on the other team. And so now I think, I would go with the ACC group. But before I would have thought, hey, it's better to have just a very well-rounded team to mitigate the number of risks that can happen on the golf course. But
I also in golf, I feel like the difference between an A and a B is like the B is still going to mess up.
Yeah.
Like a lot more.
But
and we saw that out of like Paige, right? She hit a few errant shots, especially in the clutch times. But what I noticed was that Dalkey's team, really good course management with his players. Yeah. Right. Like very, very good strategy of like, hey, Beef, we know this is what you're going to hit, so don't worry about it. Just get us right there. Paige was out driving him regularly. Yeah. Not a big deal, though, because they were just playing around that from a strategy perspective.
Right.
Or, he was like 10, 15 feet off of the green a lot of the times. And they were like, just grab your putter, right? Like they never risked the crazy chip shots or anything like that. And they were like, no, don't go for a hero shot. Like just get it up there and we'll figure it out. And he had confidence in Dalkey to do that. And they had confidence that Beef could at least pull off that putter shot. So like, I feel like the team's strategy was just significantly better in that regard.
Yeah. If you had to pick some winners and losers from this content, is there anyone that kind of stood out to you as like, oh, like I was really impressed with them?
I was very impressed with Chaz.
Yes.
And we kind of mentioned him a little earlier. I didn't really know him before this.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just his shot making. It was, as he was supporting his teammates, and I forget who he was playing with.
He was playing with Sarah Winter.
That's right.
Time. Yeah.
I think it was that round in particular where he was talking her through a lot of, like lining up the putt and, what are you going to do here? And I think the knowledge, the course management, and just how supportive he was, and just like such a great encouragement to Sarah in that round.
Yeah.
Was very, very impressive, right? Both from a skill, a knowledge, and a personality standpoint. So that really stood out to me. The one that I stood out to me the other way was, and I get it, everybody has a bad day. God knows I have more than my fair share. Was DoD King. He seemed, especially on the last day, to just not be in a good place with his game. But he was never able to pull himself out of it. He was just like, you could see him like kind of snowballing with the anger and the frustration, and it just led to more bad shots versus being able to kind of recover to what he had done in previous days.
For me, obviously he won, but I knew who he was, but I didn't know his game. And that's Brad Dahlke. And I was super impressed with his play the entire tournament. I also felt like he was just calm and was that he is that culture setter for his team. And so I was really impressed with him. Paige, like I said earlier, I was really impressed with her play. When she was teamed up with, I think it was Roger Steele. She played really well. And other than the non-play aspects, I would have put her in kind of that winner's circle. But unfortunately, I was not impressed with the off the course strategies. Obviously, I think Malosi has definitely taken a hit from this tournament, especially with the last 2 days of content. I've been hearing that there's been a lot of just hate towards him continuing on. And someone who probably is very grateful for this is Luke Kwan. Luke Kwan went from the most hated guy to like, no one even cares anymore. Like that's nothing compared to cheating on the course.
I agree. I mean, you could wake up late every day and it'll never hold a light to cheating. But you mentioned Roger Steele. I was actually really impressed with his play too. I thought he was solid. I had seen some of his content, but didn't know him really well. But I think just in terms of the early few days and what he was able to do and how consistent he was actually it was up there. I think he was one of the better players of the tournament.
No, the first round of 48, I feel like he was the MVP. I don't think there was anyone that could have beaten him with that round. Obviously, his game kind of came back down to earth for the later rounds, but he's so solid. A couple other guys that I was really impressed with was Peter Finch. I was like so impressed with Peter Finch. Obviously, I've followed Peter ever since I started golf, and I know he is so knowledgeable. And I've seen his reviews, and he doesn't do a lot of play content, right? Where he's like keeping score. So you always wonder like, how good are these guys? And like I said, I think he got shafted when Paige messed up, basically took his best player, and swapped it with her bad pick. But I was really impressed with his play. I feel like he was also just solid throughout the tournament. Two guys that were a little bit, and I think, maybe they were just having like a bad tournament was Grant Horvat. You barely saw him. He didn't have a very good tournament. And also Garrett Clark and Micah Morris. I think those were like the original good guys, right? Like it was Grant, Micah, Garrett.
That sounds right. Oh God, it's been a while, but that sounds right.
I feel like they were like part of the original good. I expected them to play a lot better, and they were tier A. So I expected them to carry their teams. And all three of them didn't play particularly well and wasn't even really on screen that much. But overall, like I thought, other than the fact that like they didn't know the skill level of all their players, it was a decent tournament.
Yeah, I do think, and what struck me on that note was that they didn't handicap at all. And I guess for a lot of these people, they don't carry official handicaps. And I thought about this too. Like if you were going into $1 million tournament, would you and could you kind of game your own handicap leading up to it? And you absolutely could. Would they? I don't know. That's maybe cheating on a whole different level. But that was actually interesting that they were just, everybody used the same tee box. Everybody was playing even. So not what I was expecting, but very interesting.
But they did say that they adjusted some of the par threes so that there was no par three longer than 170 so that everyone can play. And yes, the par fives there were some longer ones, but there's no hole where you have to play by yourself. And that's why they were like, everyone's going to start from the same tee. And it's more strategy on how you structure your order. Well, in closing, do you think they should do this event again or something similar like this again? And if so, would you change anything?
I think this is really interesting. And I think they should definitely at least try. Not too frequently, because I feel like this will get very boring very fast if they do it too often. But for me, as much as, yeah, I love the Ryder Cup. Like, I can't watch it anymore. It's just such a, I don't know. It's something about it is just boring now. And maybe it's to your point. I just have so little time to watch TV, especially TV golf, that's not where I want to spend it. I think if they made some tweaks around, some of the formatting, some of the production and, rules, I think there's something there, especially if you think about, I saw a stat, I wish I remembered the exact numbers. The Live Tour lost $1 billion in this year. Yeah. The PGA Tour lost something like 400 million. Whatever the exact numbers are. And I believe the Internet Invitational is up, right? It's actually making or going to make money. So economically, it's cool. How do you have it so that it's not just the same YouTube people? And at some point, does Portnoy just get boring or annoying to watch? Maybe. But I do think that there is something here. Oh, and I forgot to mention at the beginning where you like just fast forwarded through the cart interviews or the conversations that were happening in the cart. Mm-hmm. That was actually for me really interesting because it was like behind the ropes view, although a lot of it was just them hyping each other up and just being like, oh, you're great, that was amazing, you're great. But in terms of having access to like a player's train of thought and what they're doing and thinking, and without it being, again, that like really awkward and weird walking interview that you see on tour, just things like that I think are just refreshing compared to what you see on the other tours. So I would watch it again.
Yeah, I think the cart interviews, there were definitely people that I nitpicked and watched. Like FP, I thought was gold. Like the Bryan brothers, I didn't really care for their like cart talk. And so I was very like picky on who I listened to cart talk. But yeah, I mean, for it being, like a 3.5 hour, their first episode had over 6 million views. And I think the Ryder Cup, obviously it's different. It's live, but I think the Ryder Cup averaged like around like 4.5 million views. And so, I mean, overall eyeballs wise, they're getting about the same eyeballs, but from a production cost standpoint, I could definitely see them coming up on this tournament. Whereas, yeah, that's wild that Liv is losing $1 billion a year. I mean, they can afford it. The Saudis can afford it, right?
Yeah. If it does come back up again, I may have to spring for YouTube Premium just so that I don't have to watch the ads. Also, Big Cedar Lodge, y'all need some new ads. Like I watched the same one about 50 times.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Should we go play at Big Cedar Lodge one of these days?
I'm down. Wait, where is it? Minnesota?
Missouri,
okay, so
I think.
It's going to be a while because I think they're getting on winter, but yeah. I'm down. Let's do
prices, it's probably because it's winter prices, but the prices weren't crazy right now. It was like $225 around, but I'm sure it's because it's winter already, right?
Yeah. Maybe we do our next company offsite at Big Cedar.
Yes.
All right. Well, don't forget to drop a comment. Let us know what you thought. If you liked the Internet Invitational, would you watch it again? And while you're there, don't forget to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and drop us a comment on one of our socials. We're at TRAQ Golf on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. That's enough getting off track. May your mulligans be many and your 3 putts be few.